Picture this, mate. It's a Tuesday morning in Brisbane. No alarm dragging you out of bed, no rush to get ready for work. You make yourself a flat white, step out onto the balcony and have a quick look at your phone, not your emails, not Slack, just your brokerage account. And sitting there is a fresh deposit, not from a boss, not from a client, not because you clocked in somewhere yesterday. Just money showing up while you were asleep. Now that's what living off dividends actually looks like. And honestly, one of the questions I get asked all the time is, how much do you actually need invested to make that happen? Not some vague answer like a few $100,000 should do it. I mean a real number, something you can actually work towards. So in this video, we're going to break it down properly using Australian shares, the Australian tax system, and real-world numbers. Because the truth is, Aussies have a genuine advantage when it comes to dividend investing. And if you're not taking advantage of it, you're probably leaving money on the table. Before we jump into the numbers, it's worth understanding why Australia is actually one of the best places in the world to build a dividend income strategy. It all comes down to two words you've probably heard before: franking credits. Now, a lot of people know the term, but not many really understand how powerful it is. Back in 1987, Australia introduced a system designed to stop company profits being taxed twice. Without it, a company pays tax on its profits, then you get taxed again when those profits are paid out as dividends. Franking credits fix that problem. Basically, when an Australian company pays tax before sending you a dividend, it passes that tax credit along with the dividend. You can then use those credits to reduce your own tax bill. In plain English, the government is giving you credit for tax that's already been paid. In some cases, depending on your income, you can even end up getting money back from the ATO. That's a pretty unique setup. Investors in places like the US, the UK, and most of Europe simply don't get that benefit. And when you factor franking credits into the equation, your effective dividend yield can end up being significantly higher. That's not some tiny bonus either. It's a structural advantage built right into the Australian system. Now let's talk numbers, because this is usually where people either get really excited or start thinking, mate, there's no chance. The reality is there isn't one magic number because everyone's idea of financial freedom looks different. So let's break it into three simple lifestyle tiers. The first is what I'd call a comfortable, no-frills Australian lifestyle. You've got your housing sorted, bills covered, food on the table, maybe a few holidays each year, and you're not stressing every time you swipe your card. These days, that's probably around $45,000 to $55,000 a year. The second level is what most people would call genuinely comfortable. Maybe a nicer place to live, regular dinners out, overseas holidays every now and then, and a decent car in the driveway. Call that around $65,000 to $80,000 annually. Then there's the higher-end lifestyle, where you're not really checking supermarket prices and business-class flights don't seem ridiculous anymore. That's $100,000 plus per year. If we assume a conservative effective yield of about 5.5% from a diversified Australian dividend portfolio, including the benefit of franking credits, the maths becomes pretty straightforward. To generate $50,000 a year, you'd need roughly $910,000 invested. To generate $70,000, you'd need around $1.27 million. And to generate $100,000 annually, you're looking at about $1.82 million. I know those numbers sound huge, but don't switch off just yet, because getting there is a lot more achievable than most people think. The first thing people usually say is, mate, I'm never going to get to $1 million. Fair enough. It sounds massive when you hear it. But most people say that before they've actually looked at the compounding maths. Imagine you're 28 years old and consistently invest $1,500 a month into Australian shares while reinvesting every dividend along the way. Assuming a conservative total return of around 9% per year, which is actually lower than the long-term average of the Australian share market, you'd end up with just over $900,000 in about 19 years. You'd still be under 50. Push that contribution to $2,000 a month and the timeline gets even shorter. And if you've already got some money invested, maybe $50,000 or $80,000 sitting in the market, it speeds things up again. The point is, the big number itself isn't the problem. Time is the secret weapon. The earlier you start, the less work your money has to do later. The second question is usually about tax. People hear dividend income and assume the ATO is going to take a huge chunk of it, but this is exactly where franking credits become incredibly valuable. If your portfolio is producing around $50,000 a year in mostly fully franked dividends, and that's your primary source of income, your tax situation can be surprisingly efficient. In some cases, the franking credits can offset most or even all of your tax liability. Obviously, everyone's circumstances are different, and getting advice from a qualified accountant is always a smart move. But the key takeaway is that dividend income in Australia is often far more tax-friendly than people realize. Another trap people fall into is chasing the highest yield they can find. If you see a company paying 10%, 12%, or even 15%, it might look amazing on paper, but most of the time it's a warning sign rather than a gift. Often the share price has already collapsed, or the dividend isn't sustainable. Sometimes the company is paying out more money than it earns, which eventually leads to dividend cuts. What you really want is a quality business paying a sustainable dividend that grows over time. A company paying 4.5% today and increasing that dividend year after year will usually leave you in a much better position than a company paying 10% that eventually cuts the payout. Growth in income is what matters. As for what to actually buy, for most people the easiest starting point is a diversified ASX ETF. Something like VAS gives you exposure to hundreds of Australian companies, including many of the major dividend payers. If you want more of a dividend focus, ETFs like VHY or HVSD are worth looking into as well. Some investors also build positions directly in companies like Commonwealth Bank, Westpac, ANZ, NAB, Wesfarmers, or Woodside because of their long histories of paying frank dividends. The trade-off is pretty simple. Individual shares give you more control, but they also increase concentration risk. ETFs spread that risk across a much larger group of businesses. Then there's inflation, which doesn't get enough attention. Inflation isn't dramatic. It doesn't show up overnight. It just quietly makes everything more expensive year after year. The good news is that quality dividend-paying businesses often increase their dividends over time as their profits grow. That means your income has a chance to keep pace with rising living costs. It's one of the reasons dividend investing is so appealing compared to things like term deposits. A fixed interest rate might look attractive today, but over time inflation can quietly erode its purchasing power. Dividends, while never guaranteed, at least have the potential to grow alongside the businesses generating them. There's also a practical side to this strategy that people don't talk about enough. Most Australian companies pay dividends twice a year rather than quarterly, which means your income won't arrive in perfectly even monthly chunks. Experienced dividend investors usually build a dividend calendar so they know exactly when payments are coming in, and they keep a cash buffer of several months' expenses to smooth things out. Another thing worth thinking about is where you hold your investments. Super can be incredibly tax efficient, especially because franking credits can be even more valuable inside the super environment. The downside, of course, is that you can't access it until preservation age. That's why many people build investments both inside and outside super at the same time, giving themselves flexibility before and after retirement. So if I could leave you with a few key takeaways, it would be these. First, the numbers are real. Depending on your lifestyle, you'll probably need somewhere between $800,000 and $1.8 million invested to fully replace a salary with dividend income. Second, Australia's franking credit system is one of the biggest advantages available to investors anywhere in the world, so don't ignore it. Third, focus on quality rather than chasing the highest yield you can find. And finally, remember that the boring stuff matters. Understanding tax, dividend schedules, cash buffers, and portfolio structure can make a huge difference over the long run. At the end of the day, the biggest factor isn't finding some secret stock or magic ETF. It's simply giving your money enough time to compound. The sooner you start, the easier the journey becomes. And before you head off, mate, if you're getting value from this video, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. It will help the channel reach more people who are trying to build a better financial future for themselves. Thanks for watching, mate, and I'll see you in the next one.